Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 go. You got a mind, but even that could change. You could flip the gray matter like some batter in your brain. That's why they say, fake it till you make it A. And if you play that game...
So yesterday we are introducing our final team for champions, and that of course is Furia, the Brazilian team who finished second in the South American LCQ. At Masters 1 and 2, of course, they were not present, and I've put their expectation at group stage. Now the reason I've done that is because of what I've put at the bottom there. They have a pretty tough group. They start off with DRX, who are a team that, particularly early on in tournaments, like to do some stuff that, no one has ever seen before. They come up with some crazy ideas. They hit you with some mad stuff. Obviously, DRX have a lot of tournament experience and will feel probably pretty comfortable in that environment. And so, that's going to be a very difficult game for them. And then they have 100 Thieves and Fnatic are the other teams in their group as well, which again is going to be pretty difficult for them, I think, overall. Maybe they can do it if they get on a bit of a roll, but it's definitely going to be very, very difficult. And so let's introduce the members of Furia as well. We have Nazir, Quick, Dejin, Khalil, Mazin, and Carlau is their coach. And when we look at the agents, it's somewhat normal. We do have a bit of sharing of like jets and chambers and stuff, but on the whole, it's not too dissimilar to something you might see in a lot of teams. Outside of Quick playing Raze, that might be a bit weird. But other than that, you can see from the stats as well, it does seem a bit more like Boom, where it's a bit more of a team effort rather than, one person just fully dominating, with all of their players being, pretty good aimers, I would say, overall. The one thing that did stand out was Khalil's first kills to first deaths in the South American LCQ was absolutely absurd, as you can see. And if he keeps that up, then that is a massive, massive advantage. And, Khalil seemed to have a very good LCQ, as you can see by those stats for the roles he's playing. So, potentially a player to watch out for. We've seen a lot of controller players, kind of pop off at different moments. Maybe Khalil is the next one. In terms of looking at how Furia play, let's take a look at Fracture from the game that got them 2 champs against TVK. And we'll start off here with round number 7, where they are on the defensive side. And what's going to happen in this round is we're going to be focusing mainly on the Sage and Chamber here. Chamber has ult, he's just watching down towards A main. And we've got Mazin here, who's playing the Sage and is sitting, I guess is the word I wanted to use there, back here towards Halls and in A main. And so what happens is a flash comes in, he feels the pressure, puts up his Sage Wall, right? And this Sage Wall, it's quite a deep Sage Wall, right? So you don't get a ton of control by it. But what's good about this Sage Wall is it means that if they're breaking this wall, that means, they're pretty close. They're about to start their execute, right? But whilst that wall is up, it means that, okay, they can only come through the door. That's going to make a noise, right? It becomes pretty obvious if they are going to try and do that. If they can't come through A main as well, that's, a big kind of barrier. You can kind of threaten a pinch there as well. So you see the wall does start to get destroyed and the brim starts to rotate over. We've already got the Neon pushed up here as well, so we're in on a bit of a fast flank. In come TVK. The smoke is just a tiny bit late. Quite unlucky that it's, just like a couple milliseconds off. But they do get a 1-for-1. Mazin still does manage to get the kill. Breachel actually comes in onto the site, but because they got that first kill on the Raze there as well and got a trade, and the Sage Wall still hasn't been fully broken, there's still a big question mark about what's going on there. Now we only have a Breach and a Viper to try and get past this smoke. You see that the delay of the Sage Wall was pretty good, and now you can see that our Neon is almost behind them already with the Chamber Trap on the other side of the map. So that means that they kind of get stuck here, TBK, right? They used that breach ult, but they weren't really able to get very far. Then we see Khalil, that player I was talking about, potentially being a big threat. I mean, you look at that and you're like, that's pretty good. But what I'm really impressed with in this round is what happens next, because this Chamber still has his ult, so it is a bit of a danger. We see where the Chamber is, of course, but now I want you to check that, it's just different peak after different peak, right? So we've had Chamber peak, run away, right? Now we've had a quick breach little peak, run away, and now we get the third peak as well, all coming at different angles, right? All peaking one by one. It's like a game of whack-a-mole, and it worked really well for them, right? And they're gonna win this round. Obviously, now they're in a 4v1. Okay, Quick does get a bit caught out there perhaps by this Astra, but and then something pretty funny is going to happen. They're going to miss the jump because I think maybe they can't see where they're meant to go with the smoke. So after missing the jump a couple times, they do eventually get there and do manage to get that final kill. But now let's come to the very next round, and we need to focus on this. This Viper wall that's going across here isn't anything too out of the ordinary overall. It's just a kind of common Viper wall that you see towards the B site, and we're going to see a Sage wall up the chamber here for Furia, but they're going to almost get caught out, and they get pretty lucky, I'll be honest, because you're going to see that the player from TBK here, he sees the chamber, as you can see. And, well, Quick gets very lucky that for whatever reason, he steps back at the perfect time and avoids that sheriff shot. But, you know, these are the kind of things that I'm a bit worried about, that, you know, there were these moments in, you know, in their games, and, you know, when they played against Crew as well, Crew, I think, were able to exploit some of these moments where, you know, it's just like little things, little mistakes like that, not being fully aware of what potentially could happen, and, you know, it cost you a kill, and then that cost you a round, right? But you're going to see that even after the chamber manages to survive that situation, you know, there's a gap in the Sage wall as well, right? So they were so focused on getting that chamber boosted up and probably thought that, you know, that chamber is guaranteed a kill from it, that perhaps they didn't realize that the wall had a gap in it, because I don't think that these players are aware that this Viper is in tower at all, really. And again, against like better competition, which obviously they will be going up against at champs, you know, you can get punished for these kind of mistakes pretty heavily, and they did lose 3-0 to Crew as well in the game before this. So, you know, if that's kind of the level of team that we're talking about, you know, it does leave me a bit potentially worried for them if they do make these kind of mistakes. So, and honestly, they could have lost this round as well if this Viper, you know, after the Sage slow comes around. I'm actually a bit surprised that the Viper didn't peek this angle. We actually end up with a 1-for-1 trade instead. But now the Viper is kind of in a bit of a useless position because, you know, they might expect that someone already might be in tower, right? So the spike starts to come down, and Furia will win this round, right? So it's not the end of the world. They get a nice stun. Khalil, you know, pings it out, gets the kill on the spike carrier. The spike goes down. And, you know, everything is okay. They end up in a 4v2 and they will win the round. But you see those kind of mistakes that are coming in that I am just, you know, a little worried about overall. That, you know, a better team, you know, could punish this pretty easily, and, you know, and will punish them if they do make these kind of mistakes, as we see. They do mop it up, you know, decently well, but it's just a bit worrying that, you know, that round could have been a complete disaster. But now let's end on a positive note with the attacking bonus here for Furia, round number 15. Because in this round, they have 2 rifles, but the other players, as you can see, only have some pistols. So, you know, really they're relying on these rifles to do some damage for them, and that they will. And so they're going to try and do pretty much, they play this round pretty perfectly, to be honest. Try and find a fight with one of the rifles early on, and then, you know, play in a 5v4, and you should hopefully be, you know, pretty good, manipulate the map and whatnot from there. And you see that's exactly what happens. They see this Viper over here, they slide in, send a nice breach done there, and manage to get the first kill. Really, really good start. And I think initially, as you can tell by the smokes, they wanted to just, right, okay, let's just push it from here then, right? We've got the first kill, we should be good. But unfortunately, the breach and raise are already here and in position, so you see the aftershock, a nade, you know, a stun comes in, right? They get delayed. But whilst that's going on, the chamber is rotating, because obviously they've only showed presence towards A main at this point. This chamber has managed to sneak all the way through past this Astra and is now in a very pushed up position. But what I love about this chamber, he doesn't go over peeking. How many of you would go and peek this angle here, die, and you'd end up losing the round? The fact that he lives is so important here, and I love the fact that Quick was very patient here, because this allows his team to do this, right? Because if he dies here, that gives away the game that they will have rotated, right? If you've got someone this pushed up on one site, you're going to go to that site because you think it's clear. They actually probably, you know, and I think they actually do lose a kill here later on to this Astra because they don't expect it. But this chamber cannot die. He has to just wait for the fight to come to him, and that is exactly what he does, as he eventually will, Quick, manage to win that fight right there, and they get the kill. As I said, I don't think they expected this Astra to be here, because that happens because, you know, the chamber did walk past the Astra. We get a really nice stun and a kill there as well. We end up in a 4v1 that eventually will end in a save, as they actually go for a res. It ends up back in a 3v1, and then the raise will just save the gun. A really nice round overall, and I love the patience that was shown there overall for them. And they would go on to win this game, you know, pretty comfortably as well. I think maybe TBK get one more round. But yeah, this was a pretty comfortable showing on the attack side of Fracture, and you saw the way that they kind of worked the map there. You know, they isolated that first kill, that first fight, and it was pretty nicely done by Furia on the whole. And now let's take a look at their maps, and as you can see, outside of maybe Fracture, particularly on the attacking side, as we just showed, there isn't anything too dominant, and I think that is a bit of a worry if you're playing as an underdog. You tend to want, like, I'd rather see here, like, for Furia's sake, just some dominant maps and some that they're really bad at, because then, on those dominant maps, they can probably, beat the best teams in the world potentially if they are really comfortable on some maps, but it doesn't seem that that is the case. One advantage they might have is that they might feel confident in being open in terms of what maps they ban, which could be an advantage based on who they play, but we'll just have to see. In terms of the agents that they like, there are some interesting things here. You can see that they are out on Astra. The difference between Asia and the rest of the world concerning Astra has always kind of interested me, that all of the Asian teams, APAC, Japan, Korea, China, whatever it is, seem to love Astra. And then the rest of the world seems to much prefer Omen. And, well, that continues here with a Brazilian team liking Omen. You can see that, they are still playing a decent amount of Chamber, but also a lot of Killjoy. They do play the G2 comp on Icebox as well. That's something to note. They're still very much in on Jet, right? They haven't kind of fully embraced maybe the Raze Fade stuff, as you can see by Raze and Fade's numbers there. They're still kind of in on the old kind of Jet KO Sova stuff instead. And so, they might bring a bit of a different style as well with the agents. But then one thing that worries me as well is this pistol and ecos, because we've seen a lot of the teams in this tournament have very good pistol and eco round numbers, whereas for Furia, it just isn't quite there. And that is a bit of a worry, I think, because this could have been a way, if you are an underdog, to get a bit of an advantage, right? If you're just really good at pistols and, you win all the pistols in a game, you have a really good chance of winning that game, no matter how much of an underdog you are. So, that could have been one way, that they could have upset a few teams, but maybe, that isn't going to be the case looking at this. And so that is Furia, and I will be interested, very interested to see how they do in this tournament overall, because they will be an underdog storied, right? And we've seen, many underdogs at this point, in Valorant go pretty far in these tournaments. So we'll have to see if they can be the next one to do it, and go on a run that perhaps no one expects.